when I'm making eye contact, I am constantly thinking about how long I've been making eye contact, how long I should make eye contact, whether I'm doing it too much or not enough, etc., etc. Sometimes I would even consciously try to maintain eye contact even when it was uncomfortable. The whole time that I would be making eye contact, I would be in my head see, I can make eye contact. I'm doing it right now. This is fine. And that's just not very neurotypical. So I got diagnosed with autism earlier this year at age 28, and ever since my diagnosis, I've been looking back on my life thus far through this new lens and realizing that a lot of things about me make a lot more sense now. So today we're going to be going through some of the many things I've realized are actually related to the fact that I'm autistic, despite the years I spent gaslighting myself into believing that they couldn't possibly be related to autism. Because I'm not autistic, I just have ADHD and am otherwise a little strange for reasons that I refuse to investigate. To give you a little bit of context before we get into it, I got diagnosed at 28, but that was not the first time I considered the possibility that I might be autistic. I actually self-diagnosed when I was 18, and I knew that I was autistic. But after bringing it up with my first psychiatrist when I was 19 and being immediately shot down, and then starting therapy when I was 20 with a therapist who also refused to believe that I could be autistic, and then continuing to see that same therapist for 8 years, eventually I started to doubt it too. I actually want to make a whole other video about this, so I won't say too much about it right now, but continuing to see that therapist for so long, even though I knew I was right about my autism and that I wasn't getting the help I needed from this therapist who simply didn't believe me and continued to treat me as if I was neurotypical, was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. And it only got worse after I got diagnosed, if you can believe it. All that being said, because of the doubt that I absorbed from these external sources, I ended up going through what I call my denial years, where between the ages of 26 and 28, I basically self-undiagnosed. I had self-diagnosed when I was 18. I fully believed and knew that I was autistic for many years after, and then by the time I was 26, I was like, no, you know what? I'm not autistic, actually. I simply decided that I wasn't autistic after all, and that I had just been faking or exaggerating all of my autism-related struggles, and thought that by realizing that I wasn't actually autistic, I would somehow be free of all of the difficulties and limitations that I have related to being autistic. And that actually seemed to work for some time due to the illusory magic of masking, as well as just willful delusion. But of course, the massive effort it took to pretend for so long caught up with me, and I ended up in autistic burnout and had to face reality, and now we're here. So with all that out of the way, let's get into some of the things I gaslit myself into thinking were totally neurotypical during my years of denial. To make this just a little more fun, I have a list on my phone, and I have a bunch of numbered slips of paper in this little mug here, and I'm just gonna randomly select one at a time to make our way through the list, just to inject a little bit of whimsy into the process. All right, let's pick our first one. 11. Okay. I feel like I have to think about everything I do with my body whenever I'm around other people. How I'm standing, how I'm breathing, what my face is doing, where I'm looking, what my hands are doing, etc. I don't know how I pretended for so long that I wasn't autistic, knowing that this was something I was experiencing on the regular. Because that's not just social anxiety, that is masking. That's hyper awareness of how I'm appearing to other people so that they will think I'm normal. I can't make eye contact without thinking about the fact that I'm making eye contact. I'm so aware of it. This was something that I rationalized during my denial years as something that couldn't possibly be an autism thing because I can make eye contact, and I do. But what I was refusing to acknowledge, though, was the fact that when I'm making eye contact, I am constantly thinking about how long I've been making eye contact, how long I should make eye contact, whether I'm doing it too much or not enough, etc., etc. Sometimes I would even consciously try to maintain eye contact even when it was uncomfortable. And like, that's how I gaslit myself, because the whole time that I would be making eye contact, I would be in my head like, see, I can make eye contact. I'm doing it right now. This is fine. And that's just not very neurotypical. It's not. If you're not autistic, you are not out here thinking so much about eye contact all the time. Predictability is very important to me. Okay, so I want to give you an example. Every day at work, when I go on my break, I go to the small break room on the first floor and I eat a peanut butter chocolate chip Larabar. Same place, same snack, every single time. And sometimes there will be like special events at my workplace where there's free food for the employees. And I never go to those things. It doesn't matter what kind of food it is. Maybe it's even something that I know I like. I just will not go. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I brought my Larabar. And I have to eat my Larabar because that's part of my routine. That's what I expected of my day. And two, it's always upstairs. I don't go up there unless I have to. I certainly don't go up there to spend my break in the big break room because there are too many variables. There are like a million tables and I have to pick one and I can't be sure that it's going to be the same one every time. And you know what? That's autism. Before I got diagnosed, I really tried to explain this away as like just plain anxiety. But the problem with that is that I was still like that even when I was like in a really good place mental health wise and like my anxiety was under control. And in that way, I kind of almost gaslit myself into thinking I had a bigger anxiety problem than I did at times, because I would be like, well, anxiety is the only explanation for this, so I must be really anxious, even though I did not feel particularly anxious. So that's kind of fucked up. But also, anxiety doesn't cause like rigidity like that. That's autism, 100%. Not knowing or understanding how I feel until I've spent time alone journaling about it. If I go even 1 week without journaling, I have no idea what's going on internally. I don't know how I'm feeling, and even if I can name the feeling I'm having, I will not be able to fully understand it until I have journaled. In fact, I often actually avoid talking to anybody about how I'm feeling before I've journaled about it, because that can like very easily just make me feel more confused. Like if I were to try and explain what I'm feeling before I really understand it myself, I might, in my attempt to find the words, end up saying something that isn't really true, and then that gets tangled up with what's already going on in my head, and I'll just end up having to do more work to untangle it later. I think this all ties into both alexithymia and difficulties with interoception, which are both heavily associated with autism. Sitting on the floor talking to myself because I need to clear my head, and holding my face in my hands and saying, it's okay that you're unusual. I would just like to give my 27-year-old self a hug. Sitting on the floor talking to myself for anywhere from like 15 minutes to an hour at a time is something that I do semi-regularly. Not so much these days because I journal almost every day and that serves the purpose of like clearing my head. But I want to say in like 2023 especially, there was a time when I was doing this on the regular. And that in itself just feels pretty autistic to me. Like I would just, oh my God, a groundhog is in my yard. Groundhogs. Anyway, I would just like desperately need to untangle the mess in my head because, surprise, I have a rumination problem. And talking to myself out loud just felt like the most immediate and easy way to relieve the pressure. And also the floor just feels like the most appropriate place to do that for some reason. But I especially want to highlight the part about holding my own face in my hands and saying, it's okay that you're unusual. This honestly kind of makes me want to cry. Obviously, I knew I was different. I've always known I was different. And at that point, I had been trying really hard to be normal, aka neurotypical. And that was causing me a lot of pain. And although I wasn't yet able to realize that the reason I felt so incapable of being normal was that I was autistic, it's clear in hindsight I was trying to accept the way I am. I couldn't tell myself it's okay that you're autistic, but I could tell myself that it's okay to be unusual. I could tell myself that it's okay to not move through the world the way seemingly everybody around me does. So yeah, I want to give that version of me a hug, and I also want to thank them because given the circumstances, they were doing a pretty good job at self-acceptance. And I can see now that that baby step of acceptance was definitely a part of the greater journey of realizing and accepting that I was autistic and eventually getting diagnosed. Not thinking in words. Okay, y'all are gonna have to tell me if this is something that everybody experiences, because I'm really not sure. So like, if you're neurotypical and you know for a fact that you're neurotypical, sound off in the comments. Let me know how you experience your thoughts, because I'm really curious. And also like autistic people too, let me know if you relate to this. But the reason why I feel like this is not exactly typical is that I seem to have a harder time translating my thoughts into verbal sentences than other people do. Like, I just don't see other people struggling in the same way. And it's something that feels very frustrating to me because, for example, if I'm trying to explain to somebody my understanding of a particular subject, in my head, I understand it perfectly and it clicks. But when I try to express it out loud, I get stuck because it's like too abstract in my head to effectively put it into words. And then I end up feeling really insecure about my intelligence because like I understand the thing and I want to express my understanding, but I struggle and stumble over my words. And so from the outside, I don't think other people can see the depth of my understanding. And then I worry that people think I'm not smart. I have a low tolerance for things going wrong. This is something I simply tried to pretend wasn't an issue when I was in denial, but I really am prone to shutdowns and meltdowns when things disrupt my plan and routines. And it's something I thought I could just work on and build my tolerance to over time, and eventually it just wouldn't affect me anymore. But that's not the case because that's not how it works when you're autistic. It entirely depends on the state of my nervous system on any given day. If I'm already like pretty calm and regulated to begin with, then my tolerance might be higher that day and it won't result in a meltdown. And like, I'll be fine once the initial waves of stress pass through me, but it's definitely not something that I'm ever just gonna like completely overcome. And you know, accepting that sometimes I'm not gonna handle disruptions well has actually been a huge relief to me, because when I thought that it was something I could just train myself out of, I ended up feeling a lot of shame and guilt whenever I felt like I'd failed by getting really upset about it. And now I don't have to feel that shame and guilt. You know, I can just accept that like that is a reality for me. As an autistic person, I'm going to have shutdowns and meltdowns sometimes, and they're not fun. I don't like having them, but they are a part of my reality, and it's not like a personal moral failing if I have them in response to something not going how I expected it to go. Spending so much of my time alone. I spend the vast majority of my free time alone, and I used to just think that I was extremely introverted, and I am, but now I attribute at least some part of my introversion to being autistic. Like, I like being alone because when I'm alone, I'm in complete control of my environment and what's going on around me, and that sense of control really helps regulate my nervous system. I actually want to insert a TikTok here that I saw a little while ago that really feels relevant here. So I'm going to insert that here and then add a little bit more commentary after.
As an autistic person, do you ever feel like you can't accomplish things if someone else is in the room with you, or if someone just like walks through when you're trying to get something done and you feel so frustrated and irritated? And for those of you who are either married or live with a partner, do you find it odd that when they're gone, that's when you can get so much stuff done? I have a reading for you. I feel like my brain has two settings, which I call flexible mode and safe mode. I can usually choose which one I want to be in, though it takes some time to switch back and forth. Both have pros and cons. Flexible mode means I'm prepared for surprises and interruptions. I know they can come at any moment, so I stay alert. And when they happen, I can handle them. Safe mode means I'm able to focus without fear of interruption. I feel protected because if I know that if I begin a complex thought process, it won't get cut off. The problem with flexible mode is that it does not allow me to think very deeply or do the kind of work I find most meaningful. It also takes a lot of energy and creates physical tension in my body. The problem with safe mode is that it makes me more vulnerable. If something breaks my concentration, it's extra upsetting and it makes me lose my ability to think and speak clearly. I feel calmest and happiest in safe mode, but most of the time it isn't worth the risk. Even though flexible mode is harder, it isn't nearly as hard as suddenly being thrust out of safe mode by an interruption. Everything feels easier if I'm ready for it, but the hard part is remaining ready. Safe mode is exactly what she calls it. It's safe, and that's what I thrive most in. When I know that I can be uninterrupted, have my space, I get so much done. If my husband is around, I have to constantly be in flexible mode and be prepared for interruptions and my thought process being interrupted, and I get super irritable and frustrated and I can't seem to get much of anything done. I find there's a lot of people who are like this, whether they are autistic or not, but I find it seems to be much more prevalent in the autistic community, and this just put into words what I could never seem to put into words before.
I need time to be in safe mode frequently. If I spend too much of my time in flexible mode, I can literally feel the stress and tension building in my body. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when my recent autistic burnout started around the end of last year, I was constantly in flexible mode. So I need to be in safe mode often in order to self-regulate, and I can't be in safe mode when there are other people around. So that's definitely a big part of why I spend so much time alone. Say hi to Gracie. Do you have anything to say? Well said. Okay, this one is making me chuckle because I know for a fact that I've been doing it while I've been recording this video. Looking around a lot, especially when I'm talking. I vividly remember one time in middle school, a friend commenting on this because she thought it was weird. And she definitely said it in a way that was like, you should stop doing that. And that makes me kind of sad now that I think about it, because I'm pretty sure that was one of the early experiences that taught me I needed to mask, because if I wasn't masking, people would notice and comment on the things they found weird about me, and also the way I am when I'm not masking makes people uncomfortable. So that's kind of sad. Don't love that. I realize now that this is for a couple of reasons. Part of it is because I'm just trying to look anywhere but people's faces, and this is when I'm talking face to face with another person, but it's also just because it generally helps me focus on what I'm trying to say. I will say that when you're recording on a camera, looking directly into the camera feels like eye contact, and I can't explain it, but if you're autistic, let me know if you feel that way too, because that's definitely how it feels for me. It feels like making eye contact. Regardless, part of it is because I'm trying to just look anywhere but people's faces, and part of it is because it just generally helps me focus on what I'm trying to say, and I especially can't focus on what I'm trying to say when I'm looking directly into somebody's eyes or looking at their face. I never really acknowledged it at all during my time of denial, and in fact, if I noticed it at all, I was definitely just trying to not do it, or at least tone it down. Feeling like an alien and like I'm too sensitive to function in this world. I have always felt deeply incompatible with the world I live in, and the way I rationalized this when I was in denial was just to be oh, I'm just a starseed. My soul isn't from here, so that's why it's hard for me to exist here. It's because this is my spirit's first time incarnating on Earth. And I have a chuckle about that now, because it's just no, you just have autism. But there is a part of me that still kind of believes it, if I'm being honest. I don't know. When things feel particularly hard, it's a comforting thought. You know, when I feel especially misunderstood or I'm struggling to navigate life, it can be kind of nice to just think, well, of course I'm having such a hard time. This isn't my world. And like, you see the logic, right? You can see how I formed that belief in the first place. It's not a huge leap from this isn't my world to this world wasn't built for me, which is something pretty much all autistic people can relate to. Shutting down when I'm wearing clothes that are even mildly uncomfortable. I loved pretending that this was not even a problem for me and just like willfully ignoring the reality that I was in fact experiencing autistic shutdowns due to sensory overload. Cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug. When people laugh at things I say or find me funny, a majority of the time it's on accident and I'm caught off guard by people laughing because I wasn't trying to be funny. This is something I've heard other autistic people talk about, so I know I'm not alone here. I loved making up narratives in my head about why I am the way I am that included anything but being autistic. I used to just tell myself, oh, it's just one of my little quirks. I'm only funny on accident, and just like refuse to think about it any further, despite the fact that it would actually kind of stress me out. And I started to overthink everything that I was about to say before I would say it, and sometimes even not saying something because I thought it might make people laugh when I wasn't intending it to, which is still so bizarre to me. I don't know why it made me so uncomfortable. Like, I know people aren't laughing in a malicious way, and it's nice to make people laugh, right? Like, everybody wants to be funny and make people laugh. I think it was just the fact that it always made me feel like I was missing something, and that would like trigger my social anxiety, because I do have a lot of social anxiety around like missing something that everybody else seems to get. Anyway, I've started to embrace this about myself, or at least try to. I still get hit with that surge of anxiety sometimes, but I've started to form a new narrative in my head to help myself relax and embrace it a bit more, which is that I am funny and my humor is just so intuitive that I don't even realize I'm doing it until other people laugh. Not knowing how to talk to my coworkers about anything other than work. If the conversation is off script, I'm lost. I know how to have two kinds of conversations with my coworkers, and that is talking about work and small talk, or some combination of the two. God help me if the conversation shifts to anything personal, because I don't have a script for that. I know how small talk is supposed to go. I have scripts for small talk. I don't love small talk, and it can feel quite monotonous and pointless sometimes because it feels like we're always just like saying the same things, but I'm familiar with it. And like, it's comfortable because I'm familiar with it. Talking about work is better because it feels more honest and authentic, and I can like actually say what I'm thinking, especially when we start commiserating. That's actually when I feel the most in community with my coworkers. I love complaining with my coworkers, but oh my God, when any of them ask me questions about myself and my life, I get so uncomfortable. I don't know what's appropriate to share in that context. I don't know if they're gonna think I'm rude if I give short answers or if I don't ask them questions back. I don't know how long this conversation is supposed to go on. When I'm at work, I'm in work mode. And work mode has scripts for customers and coworkers, and none of those scripts prepare me for particularly authentic conversation. Which is not to say I'm being totally inauthentic at work, but I'm definitely not being my whole self, because first of all, work mode doesn't call for that, and also I don't feel safe being my whole self around people I don't know very well, because being my whole self means being unmasked, and I'm not about to be unmasked at my very public-facing job. I often feel like I'm missing the joke and also can't tell when someone's messing with me, so I respond to what they said at face value and then feel embarrassed when they tell me they were joking or explain what they actually meant. So let me give you an example of this. So there was this one time where I was at work and I had these two customers that were there together and they were buying alcohol, and I checked one of their IDs because like to my eyes, they both seemed old enough to be buying alcohol. And the only time that we need to check like the IDs of everybody in a group is if they seem really young, and that was not the case in this context. So I only checked one of the IDs, and then one of my managers came over and she asked me if I checked both of their IDs, and in my head I'm like, what? And I was like panicking a little, but on the outside I was just like, no, I didn't. And then she kind of chuckled and she was like, I'm just kidding, this is my son. And I just felt this like wave of embarrassment go through my body because like I had no idea that when she asked if I checked both their IDs, she was joking. There was no part of me that knew that. And I can't tell you how many times in my life this kind of thing has happened. It's a semi-regular occurrence. And during the time that I was in denial about being autistic, I would like rationalize this trait by just like telling myself, some people just have a sense of humor that doesn't make sense to me. My sense of humor and this person's sense of humor just aren't compatible. Except that this happens frequently and even with the people I'm closest with. So that argument doesn't hold up. The mental gymnastics I had to do to dodge the autism allegations in my head were truly something to behold. T-Rex arms! The fucking T-Rex arms. I nearly masked the T-Rex arms out of me, but they were there. And now that I'm consciously trying to unmask more, I notice myself doing T-Rex arms all the time. It makes me kind of sad to think of all the times that I would catch myself doing it and feel the need to fix it. Because, like, there's nothing wrong with T-Rex arms. But of course, it's stereotypically associated with autism. And so that was one of those things that I just wouldn't let myself do because I was always masking. All right, we are on the last one. Shutting down during trips to the store. I can't tell you how many times I have shut down either from my time in the store itself or even just from the car ride to the store. There was one time when I was going to the farmer's market and the combination of the sun shining in my eyes, my glasses sliding down my nose, and the road being really bumpy caused me to completely shut down to the point where I was almost nonverbal and could not get out of the car by the time we got there. There's no neurotypical explanation for that. And I don't think I even tried to explain it away at the time. I think I just chose not to think about it. All right, and that is all I have for you today. I do have a pretty long list. What I shared with you today was like half of it, so there will be a part 2. Keep an eye out for that. And if you relate to any of these things, please leave a comment and let me know. I'm really curious to see how many of these things are relatable to other autistic people. Although this channel will always remain a place for me to express myself and my interests in general, there will be a lot more autism related content to come, so if you like this video, you'll probably like it here. And besides, even when the content isn't explicitly about autism, it will have an autistic perspective because I'm autistic. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!